"Can you come get me?" abused Waitress called the Vampire King, after her ex broke her arm. Ambrose. Her voice was soft, a fragile thing barely surviving the static of the payphone. "You told me once that if the world ever tried to crush me, I didn't have to face it alone." She cradled her shattered left arm, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. The pain was blinding, but her plea was quiet, a surrender to necessity. "I can't be strong tonight," she whispered, her forehead resting against the cold glass. "He broke me. Can you come get me?" Silence stretched. Then, a voice like velvet over steel. "Stay there. I am coming." 30 minutes earlier, the neon sign of Whitshaw's diner had buzzed with a dying insect hum, casting a sickly pink light over the wet asphalt of District 4. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee, burnt grease, and the copper tang of despair. It was a smell that usually felt like home, or at least the closest thing Marielle had to it. Tonight, however, the air smelled of blood and cheap, sour bourbon. Marielle sat on the floor of the supply closet, her knees pulled to her chest, her back pressed against metal shelves stacked with gallons of industrial cleaner. The chemical scent of ammonia stung her eyes, but it was better than the smell of Vincent's cologne. Her left arm was cradled against her chest, throbbing with a pulse that seemed louder than her own heart. The radius was snapped. She knew that specific, nauseating grind of bone on bone. It wasn't a hairline fracture. It was a break. She didn't need a doctor to tell her that Vincent had done it properly this time. Vincent Greycastle, a name that sounded regal, fit for a storybook prince, but belonged to a man who ruled nothing but her fear. "Marielle." Vincent's voice boomed from the main dining area, muffled slightly by the thin door but losing none of its venom. It wasn't slurred. That was the worst part about Vincent. He was most dangerous when he was sober and angry. Drunk Vincent was sloppy. Sober Vincent was surgical. "Come out, darling. You're making a scene. Theodore is watching." Theodore Whitshaw, the owner, would be watching. Yes. Marielle could picture him exactly, wiping down the counter with that grey rag, his eyes fixed resolutely on the coffee pot, deaf and blind to the violence occurring 10 feet away. In Nightcrest, survival meant minding your own business. You didn't intervene in domestic disputes, especially not when the aggressor was Vincent, a man who ran numbers for the local syndicate and had low friends in high places. Theodore had a business to run. He couldn't afford a hero complex. "I know you're in there," Vincent crooned, closer now. The heavy tread of his boots vibrated through the floorboards. "You made me do this, Marielle. You know that, right? Hiding money? From us?" She hadn't hidden money. She had bought a new pair of shoes because the soles of her old ones had worn through to her skin. $10. That was the price of her arm. Marielle tried to stand, but the pain greyed her vision, narrowing the world to a pinprick of light. She bit her lip until it bled to keep from screaming. With shaking fingers, she reached into her apron pocket, pushing past the lint and the loose change, until she touched the sharp corner of the card. It was distinct against her fingertips, thick black cardstock with silver-embossed edges that felt cool to the touch. It was 3 years old, yet the edges were as sharp as the day she received it. She remembered that night vividly. It had been 3 a.m., the graveyard shift where the city's ghosts came to eat. A man had sat in the corner booth, shrouded in shadows. He had been pale, impossibly elegant, wearing a suit that cost more than the building they sat in. But he had looked starving, not for food, but for something else, something vital. He had the look of a creature that had walked a desert for 1,000 years. She had given him her own meal, a simple turkey sandwich on rye, because the kitchen was closed and he looked like he hadn't felt warmth in a century. "I cannot pay you," he had said, his voice a low rumble that made the hair on her arms stand up. "It's on the house," she had lied, knowing Theodore would dock her pay. "You look like you need a win tonight." He hadn't eaten the food. He had just stared at it, and then at her, with eyes like shattered amethyst, violent, beautiful, and ancient. "Kindness is a rare currency in Nightcrest, child," he had said, sliding the black card across the formica table. "Most trade in cruelty. If you ever find yourself bankrupt of hope, spend this. Ambrose Greyhaven. No phone number, just a sigil on the back and a magnetic strip. But she knew the number. She had memorized it, a lifeline she never thought she'd deserve to use. Back in the closet, the doorknob rattled. "Open up, Marielle," Vincent sighed, sounding bored. "Don't make me kick it down. Theodore will bill us for the damage." The card felt like an anchor in her hand, a heavy, impossible promise. She didn't answer. Instead, she scrambled up, biting back a cry as her arm jarred. She slipped out the back door of the closet, which led directly into the alleyway, a fire exit Theodore kept illegally unlocked for his smoke breaks. The rain hit her like a physical blow. It was torrential, an icy curtain that instantly soaked her thin uniform, plastering the fabric to her shivering skin. She stumbled into the dark, her boots splashing through puddles of oil and grime. She moved toward the payphone on the corner, the only one left in District 4 that hadn't been gutted for parts by copper thieves. She fumbled the coins into the slot, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She dialed the number from memory. 1 ring. 2 rings. Ambrose. After the call, she slumped against the glass of the booth. The rain hammered down, washing the blood from her lip, but doing nothing for the fire in her arm. He had said, "Stay where you are." But Vincent was coming. She could hear the back door of the diner slam open, metal screeching against brick. "There you are," Vincent's voice cut through the storm, terrifyingly calm. He stood at the mouth of the alley, a silhouette of malice against the dim light of the street. He held a tire iron loosely in one hand, tapping it rhythmically against his thigh. Tap, tap, tap. "Running away? With my tips? After I specifically told you we need to pay the rent." He took a step forward, his boots crunching on broken glass. Marielle couldn't breathe. The pain in her arm flared white-hot, stealing her voice. She slid down the glass wall of the booth until she hit the floor. "I didn't take anything, Vincent. Please, just let me go." "You took my pride, Marielle, making me chase you in the rain like a dog." He took another step, raising the iron. "I think the other arm needs to match. Symmetry is important." Then, the world shifted. It wasn't a sound. It was a sudden, violent change in the air pressure, as if the atmosphere itself had been sucked out of the alley. The rain seemed to slow down, the droplets hanging suspended in the air for a fraction of a second too long. The shadows around the payphone stretched, unnatural and long, pooling together like spilled ink, defying the light of the street lamp. Vincent stopped walking. He didn't look at Marielle. He looked past her, over the roof of the phone booth, his eyes widening in a way Marielle had never seen. Pure, primal confusion. The arrogance drained from his face, replaced by the instinctual fear of a prey animal sensing a predator. "Who the hell is that?" he whispered, lowering the tire iron. Marielle turned her head, following his gaze. The phone booth wasn't empty anymore. Someone was standing behind it, in the deep dark of the unlit street. There had been no car, no footsteps, no sound of approach, just the sudden, impossible presence of a shadow darker than the night. The figure stepped into the dim halo of the flickering street lamp. He was tall, impossibly so, wearing a charcoal overcoat that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The The cut was severe, archaic, yet timeless. He held a black umbrella, but he wasn't holding it over himself. He was holding it out, shielding the empty space where Marielle would be if she stepped out of the booth. The rain bounced off the canopy, but Ambrose Greyhaven remained perfectly dry, as if the elements themselves dared not touch him. It was him, the man from 3 years ago. But he looked different, older, in a way that had nothing to do with wrinkles and everything to do with the weight of his gaze. His skin was the color of moonlight on snow, pale to the point of translucence, and his eyes, those amethyst eyes, were burning with a cold, terrifying clarity. They weren't the eyes of a starving man anymore. They were the eyes of a king looking at a trespasser. "I believe," Ambrose said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the crash of thunder. "The lady asked for a ride." Vincent blinked, shaking his head as if to clear a fog. He scoffed, regaining his bravado. He didn't know who this was. To Vincent, this was just some rich interloper who had taken a wrong turn into District 4. "This is private business, pal. Walk away before you need a dentist." Ambrose tilted his head. A small, sad smile touched his lips. It was the most frightening thing Marielle had ever seen, a smile that promised ruin. "A dentist," Ambrose mused, tasting the word. How quaint. It has been decades since I heard such a mundane threat. A low, guttural purr tore through the alley, vibrating in Marielle's chest. A sleek, matte black sedan, long and low like a panther stalking through the grass, rolled silently around the corner. It had no headlights on, yet it moved with predatory precision. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like voids into another dimension. It stopped right next to the payphone, the engine idling with a sound like a restrained beast. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out. She was massive, at least 6'3", with hair like spun copper wire and a jagged scar running through one eye. She wore a tailored suit that strained against muscles built for war, not chauffeuring. This was Tanith Ironcrest. She didn't look at Vincent. She didn't even acknowledge his existence. She looked at Ambrose, waiting for a command, her stillness more threatening than Vincent's rage. "Tanith," Ambrose said softly, his eyes never leaving Vincent. "Please assist Marielle into the car. Be mindful of her left arm. The ulna is intact, but the radius is a spiral fracture. The nerve damage is extensive." Marielle froze, her breath hitching. How? How could he know the specific type of fracture from 10 feet away? She hadn't told him. She hadn't told anyone. Vincent stepped forward, sensing he was losing control of the narrative. He swung the tire iron up, a desperate display of dominance. "I said back off. She's coming with me." Ambrose didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply ceased to be in front of the car and was suddenly standing 2 inches from Vincent. It happened in the blink of a shutter. 1 second he was 10 feet away. The next, his hand, pale, manicured, elegant, was wrapped around the rusted steel of the tire iron. There was no blur of motion, no sound of movement, just displacement. Vincent gasped, his eyes bulging. He pulled, his biceps straining, veins popping in his neck. The iron didn't move. Ambrose held it with the casual indifference of someone holding a feather. "Iron," Ambrose whispered, leaning in. The smell of him wafted toward Marielle, ozone, dried lavender, and old, dusty books. Crude, heavy, loud. "So very like you, Vincent Greycastle." Ambrose's thumb pressed into the solid steel of the tire iron. With a sickening groan of metal, a sound like a dying machine, the thick steel bar began to bend. It didn't snap. It folded like wet cardboard under the pressure of his thumb. Vincent released it with a yelp, stumbling back, his face draining of all color. He stared at the weapon, now twisted into a useless loop, and then up at the monster who had done it. "You broke something precious of mine," Ambrose said. His voice wasn't angry. It was disappointed, which was infinitely worse. "I do not like it when people break my things." "Yours?" Vincent stammered, his back hitting the wet brick wall. "She's my girlfriend. She's nobody." "She invoked the debt," Ambrose said simply. "That makes her a ward of the Greyhaven line. If you come near her again, Vincent, if you even speak her name in a dark room, I will not bend a piece of metal." Ambrose stepped closer, his shadow swallowing Vincent whole. "I will bend you." Tanith was already at the phone booth. Her hands, despite her size and the violence radiating from her stance, were incredibly gentle. "Ma'am," she said, her voice gravelly but kind. "Let's get you out of the wet." Marielle stumbled out, trembling uncontrollably. She looked at Vincent. The man who had terrorized her for 2 years was pressed against the brick wall, shaking, staring at the bent tire iron in the puddle. He looked small, pathetic. As she slid into the back seat, the interior enveloped her. It was warm, silent, and smelled of safety. Ambrose slid in beside her, closing the door and sealing out the rain, the noise, and the man who had broken her. "Drive, Tanith," Ambrose said. As the car pulled away, gliding over the potholes as if hovering, Marielle looked back through the rear window. Vincent wasn't watching them leave. He was on his knees, picking up the bent tire iron with trembling hands, and from the deepest shadows of the alley, where the light couldn't reach, another figure emerged to stand over him. It was a woman in a stark white dress, holding a lace parasol despite the night and the rain. She didn't look wet. She reached down and handed Vincent a handkerchief. Vincent took it, looking up at the woman, not with fear, but with reverence. Ambrose saw it too in the rearview mirror. His jaw tightened, and a flicker of genuine alarm crossed his stoic face. "So," he murmured to himself, "the White Court has found a pawn." The drive was silent, but it was a silence filled with unspoken questions. The city of Nightcrest blurred past the tinted windows, Gothic spires piercing the industrial smog, the glitter of the wealthier districts giving way to the dark, winding roads of the old hills. The further they drove, the more the modern world seemed to fall away, replaced by ancient stone and brooding forests. Ambrose didn't touch her. He sat on the far side of the leather bench, his hands folded neatly in his lap. He looked tired, the shadows under his eyes stark against his pale skin. "Does it hurt?" he asked, not looking at her, his gaze fixed on the passing tree line. "Yes," Marielle whispered. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a jagged, throbbing agony that made her want to vomit. "It feels like it's on fire." "Good," Ambrose said, his voice soft. "Pain means the nerves are still firing. It means the connection isn't severed. We can fix it." They turned through a massive iron gate, flanked by gargoyles that looked disturbingly alert, their stone eyes seeming to track the car's movement. The Greyhaven estate wasn't a castle, but a sprawling, modernist mansion made of glass and black stone, perched precariously on a cliff overlooking the churning ocean. It was a fortress disguised as a piece of art, cold, beautiful, and impenetrable. The car stopped in an underground garage that looked more like a surgical bay. The walls were white tile, the lights stark and clinical. "We have a medical suite," Ambrose explained, as Tanith opened the door. "Hospitals ask questions. Questions lead to police. Police lead to complications that I do not have the patience for tonight." Marielle stepped out, her legs wobbling. Ambrose was there instantly, his hand hovering near her elbow but not making contact. "I can carry you," he offered. No ego in the statement, just fact. "I can walk," she gritted out. She needed to walk. She needed to feel like she had some control left, even if it was just over her own feet. He nodded, respecting the boundary. "This way." They entered a room that smelled of antiseptic, sage, and copper. A woman was already scrubbing her hands at a stainless steel sink. She was slender, with silver hair tied in a severe bun, and eyes that were entirely black. No whites, no irises, just deep, endless pools of ink. This was Celestia Lakewood. "Spiral fracture," Celestia said without turning around, her voice dry and brittle. "I can hear the blood rushing around the break. It's loud." "Sit her down, Ambrose." Marielle sat on the sterile bed, the paper crinkling beneath her. Celestia turned, her black eyes unreadable. She placed her hands over Marielle's arm. Her palms were cold, ice cold, like stones pulled from a river in winter. "This will sting," Celestia said flatly. It didn't sting. It felt like being struck by lightning. Marielle screamed, a raw, tearing sound. Her back arched off the bed, but Tanith was there, her heavy hands holding her shoulders down firmly. "Breathe." Ambrose's voice was in her ear, urgent and commanding. "Look at me, Marielle. Look at me." She forced her eyes open, tears blurring her vision. She locked onto his violent, violet gaze. He wasn't blinking. He was murmuring something under his breath, a low, rhythmic chant in a language that sounded like water flowing over stones, syllables that vibrated in her bones. As he spoke, the pain began to recede, not disappearing but changing. It transformed from a jagged fire into a cool, heavy numbness. She watched, horrified and fascinated, as the skin of her arm rippled. Under the bruised flesh, she could see the bone moving, sliding back into place. It wasn't the instant, sparkling magic of fairy tales. It was visceral. It looked grueling. It was biology being forced to obey a superior will. When it was over, 20 minutes later, Marielle was soaked in sweat, panting as if she had run a marathon. Her arm was whole. The bruising was still there, ugly purples and yellows, but the break was gone. Celestia wiped her hands on a towel, the black of her eyes seeming to swirl. "She needs rest and food, real food, not diner grease. Her iron levels are pathetic." Ambrose nodded, stepping back, looking drained. "Tanith, show her to the blue room." "Wait," Marielle said. Her voice was weak, barely a whisper. She looked at Ambrose. "Why?" Ambrose paused, his hand on the doorframe. "Why what?" "Why did you come? It was 3 years ago. I gave you a sandwich. That's it. People don't do this for a sandwich. Not people like you." Ambrose turned to her. For the first time, the mask of the stoic king slipped. He looked incredibly lonely. "You didn't just give me a sandwich, Marielle," he said softly. "That night I was being hunted. I was weak. My blood was toxic from a poison I hadn't anticipated. I was ready to let them take me. Your kindness didn't just feed me. It hid me. You looked a hunter in the eye, a man who would have killed you without a second thought, and told him you hadn't seen anyone. You saved the king of Nightcrest because you thought he was a homeless man." Marielle blinked. She remembered that. A scary man with a jagged knife had asked if she'd seen a drifter. She lied because she hated bullies. She hadn't known she was intervening in a war. "I pay my debts," Ambrose said, "and the Greyhaven line protects its own. You are under my roof now. No one touches you without my permission." "And if I want to leave?" she asked, testing the bars of her new cage. "Then you leave," Ambrose said immediately. "The door is unlocked." "But," he gestured to the window where the storm was raging against the cliffs. The wolves are out tonight, Marielle, and now that Vincent knows you have my favor, he will sell that information to the highest bidder. You are valuable now." Marielle looked down at her healed arm. On the inside of her wrist, right where the bone had been broken, there was now a faint, shimmering mark beneath the skin. It pulsed with a soft, violet light. It looked like a heraldic crest, a dragon coiled protectively around a blooming rose. "What is this?" she asked, rubbing the skin. It felt warm. Ambrose's face went rigid. Celestia dropped the towel she was holding. "That," Ambrose whispered, crossing the room in 2 strides to stare at the mark with genuine horror, "should not be possible. I didn't give you the blood oath. I only healed you." "The mark appeared on its own?" Celestia asked, her voice trembling for the first time. "Ambrose, the wards. They didn't trigger." Ambrose looked at Marielle, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Not as a charity case, but as a variable he hadn't accounted for. "It means," the Vampire King said, his voice hollow, "that the house hasn't just accepted you as a guest, Marielle. The ancient magic of the estate has claimed you as its mistress. You are not just a ward anymore. You are the queen of a castle you do not own." The first week at the Greyhaven estate passed in a blur of velvet silence and impossible luxury. Marielle's arm was healing at a supernatural rate. The bone had knit, leaving only a faint ache when it rained. But the mark on her wrist, the dragon and the rose, burned with a constant, low-level fever. She rarely saw Ambrose. He was a ghost in his own home, leaving before dawn and returning when the moon was high. The mansion, however, seemed to be watching her. Doors opened before she reached for the handle. Lights flickered on as she entered rooms. Once, when she shivered in the library, the fireplace roared to life instantly, the flames licking the grate with an eagerness that felt almost sentient. "The house likes you," Tanith said one morning, placing a tray of breakfast on the balcony table. "It usually tries to trip me." "It's a house, Tanith," Marielle murmured, staring out at the grey, churning ocean. "It doesn't have feelings." "It's the Greyhaven estate," Tanith corrected, pouring tea. "It has moods, and right now it's purring." A sleek white limousine crunched over the gravel of the driveway below. It didn't look like a car. It looked like a shark on wheels. "We have company," Tanith said, her hand instantly going to the gun holstered beneath her blazer. "Stay here." Marielle, of course, didn't stay. She moved to the edge of the balcony, looking down. Ambrose was waiting at the front steps. He looked impeccable, but rigid. A woman stepped out of the white car. It was the woman from the alleyway, the one who had given Vincent the handkerchief. Up close, she was devastating. Her skin was the color of skimmed milk, her hair a platinum blonde that looked like ice, and she wore a suit of sharp, white silk. This was Philomena Frosthall, the matriarch of the White Court. Ambrose bowed, but it was a mockery of respect. "Philomena, to what do I owe the displeasure?" "Civility, Ambrose." Philomena's voice drifted up, chiming like wind chimes made of bone. "I came to check on your pet, the stray you picked up in District 4. "She is a guest," Ambrose said, his voice dropping an octave. "And she is under the aegis." "Is she?" Philomena smiled, revealing teeth that were slightly too sharp. "Vincent misses her. He's been changing, evolving. He speaks of her constantly. He wants to apologize." "He can apologize to the worms," Ambrose replied. "You look tired, King," Philomena noted, stepping closer and brushing invisible dust from Ambrose's lapel. "The grey line is fading. You spend so much energy maintaining the balance. Why not let it tip? Chaos is so much more." Fun. Up on the balcony, Marielle felt a surge of cold rage. It wasn't just her anger, it felt ancient, emanating from the stone beneath her feet. She gripped the railing. Suddenly, a gargoyle perched above the front door, a massive stone beast that had sat motionless for a century, tilted its head. With a grinding sound of rock on rock, a heavy slate roof tile dislodged itself from directly above Philomena. Ambrose moved in a blur, shoving Philomena aside just as the tile shattered on the spot where she had been standing. Shards of stone exploded like shrapnel. Philomena stumbled back, her composure cracking. She looked up, her eyes locking directly onto Marielle's on the balcony. "An accident," Ambrose said smoothly, though he was looking up at Marielle with wide eyes. "The estate is old. Things fall." Philomena straightened her jacket, her gaze icy. "Things do not fall at Greyhaven, Ambrose. They are thrown." She pointed a manicured finger at Marielle. "Your stray has teeth. Good. She'll need them when Vincent comes to collect what is his." As she got back into her car, the engine didn't start. The tires suddenly flattened, all four at once, with a synchronized hiss. The house was not done with her. "You must learn to control it," Ambrose said. It was midnight. They were in the grand ballroom, a cavernous space of black marble and mirrors. The only light came from the moonlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Control what?" Marielle asked. She felt small in the vast room. "I didn't do anything to her car." "You wanted her to stay," Ambrose said, pacing around her. "So the house kept her. You wanted to hurt her. So the house threw a stone. You are a conduit, Marielle. My ancestors built this place with blood magic, binding it to the Greyhaven bloodline. But the magic has chosen you. Why?" "Because," Ambrose stopped, facing her, "I believe the house pities you. And in its pity, it has given you a weapon." He held out a hand. "Dance with me." "I don't know how to waltz, Ambrose. I poured coffee for a living." "Then I will lead. Trust me." She took his hand. His skin was cool, but the connection sent a jolt of warmth through her arm, straight to the mark on her wrist. He pulled her close, his other hand settling on her waist. They began to move. At first she was clumsy, stepping on his toes, but he adjusted effortlessly, guiding her into the rhythm. There was no music, only the sound of their breath and the slide of feet on marble. "Vincent," she whispered, looking at his chest. "Philomena said he was changing. What did she mean?" "The White Court does not give gifts freely," Ambrose murmured, spinning her. "They trade in power. Vincent desired strength to control you. They likely gave him a draft of the old blood. It will make him strong, fast, and resilient. But it will burn away whatever humanity he had left. He is becoming a ghoul." Marielle shuddered. "Can he get in here?" "The wards are strong," Ambrose said, but there was a hesitation in his voice. "However, wards are tied to the life force of the caster. And I am not as strong as I once was." She looked up at him. "Why?" He stopped dancing. They stood in the center of the moonlit room. He looked down at her, his amethyst eyes filled with a profound exhaustion. "3 years ago," he said quietly, "when you found me. I wasn't just starving, Marielle. I was dying. The Greyhaven line is cursed to bear the sins of the city. We absorb the darkness so the humans don't have to. Every murder, every betrayal in Nightcrest, it weighs on us. I was overloaded. I went out that night to end it, to let the sun take me." Marielle's breath hitched. "But you didn't." "No, you gave me a sandwich." A faint smile touched his lips. "And for the first time in a century, I felt seen. Not as a king, or a monster, or a savior, just a man who was hungry. That act of pure, Unasked-for kindness was a tether. It pulled me back from the edge. He lifted his hand and gently brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. You saved me, Marielle, and in doing so, you unknowingly tied your fate to a sinking ship. As his fingers grazed her skin, the mark on her wrist flared with blinding violet light. Marielle gasped. She didn't feel pain. She felt a rush of energy leaving her, pouring out of her core and into him. Ambrose's eyes widened. The shadows under them vanished. The color returned to his cheeks. The exhaustion evaporated. He pulled his hand back as if burned, staring at her in shock. You didn't just save me then, he whispered, looking at his own hands, which were now steady and strong. You just fed me. Without a drop of blood. The attack didn't happen at night. It happened at noon, under the cover of a torrential grey downpour that turned the sky as dark as twilight. Marielle was in the kitchen with Celestia, learning which herbs numbed pain and which caused it when the alarm sounded. It wasn't a siren. It was a low, mournful bell that tolled from the depths of the earth. The perimeter, Celestia hissed, dropping a jar of nightshade. Someone has crossed the salt line. Tanith burst into the room, a shotgun in one hand and a silver sword in the other. Get her to the safe room, now! Where is Ambrose? Marielle demanded, grabbing a paring knife from the counter. He's at the gate, Tanith shouted. Go! Marielle ran, but not to the safe room. She ran to the foyer. She had to see. Through the massive glass doors, she saw the front lawn. It was a battlefield. Shadows whipped through the rain, Ambrose moving faster than human sight, striking down figures in white tactical gear. But there was one figure he wasn't striking. Vincent. He stood in the center of the chaos, unmoving. He looked monstrous. His skin was grey, his veins black and pulsing against the surface. He was twice the size he had been, his muscles tearing through his shirt. And in his hand, he held a massive sledgehammer. Ambrose! Marielle screamed as Vincent swung the hammer. Ambrose dodged, but Vincent was unnaturally fast. The hammer clipped Ambrose's shoulder, sending the Vampire King flying into one of the stone gargoyles. Ambrose crumbled, the stone shattering around him. Vincent laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound. Marielle! He roared, his voice sounding like grinding rocks. Come out! I just want to talk! Marielle pushed past Tanith. She threw open the front doors and stepped out into the rain. No! Ambrose shouted from the rubble, trying to stand, blood leaking from his mouth. Vincent turned to her. His eyes were entirely white. He smiled, and his mouth was full of needle-like teeth. There you are, baby. Look at me. I'm strong now. I'm strong enough for you. You're a monster, Vincent, Marielle said, her voice steady. The rain soaked her instantly, but she didn't feel cold. She felt the house humming beneath her feet. I did this for you, Vincent screamed, stepping forward, so nobody could ever look down on us again. Now get over here before I have to break your legs to keep you still. He charged. Marielle didn't run. She raised her left hand, palm open. The mark on her wrist burned hot. Stop him, she thought. Protect me. The gravel of the driveway exploded. Thick, thorny vines of black iron, the roots of the estate itself, erupted from the ground. They lashed out like vipers, wrapping around Vincent's ankles, his waist, his throat. Vincent roared, straining against them, tearing at the metal roots with his claws. He was strong, terrifyingly so. He ripped one vine apart, then another, inching closer to her. I love you, he gargled, reaching for her neck. Ambrose was suddenly there, between them. He didn't use magic. He used a jagged piece of the broken gargoyle. He drove it into Vincent's chest, right through the heart. Vincent froze. He looked at Ambrose, then at Marielle. The white faded from his eyes for a second, leaving them brown and scared. "Marielle," he whispered. Then he dissolved. It wasn't a clean death. He crumbled into ash and black sludge, washing away in the rain. Ambrose stood, panting, covered in black ichor. He turned to Marielle, his eyes wild. He grabbed her shoulders. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you?" "I'm fine," she said, shaking. "The house." It tried to stop him. "It did more than try," Ambrose said, looking at the iron vines that were slowly retreating back into the earth. "It obeyed you completely." Celestia came running out, holding a device that looked like a Geiger counter. It was clicking furiously. She pointed it at the pile of sludge that used to be Vincent. "Ambrose," she said, her voice shaking. "Look at the readings. Vincent wasn't just a ghoul, he was a bomb." Ambrose looked down. The black sludge was glowing with a faint, rhythmic white light. "Beep, beep, beep! Run!" Ambrose yelled, tackling Marielle and covering her body with his own. The explosion was silent. A wave of white force erupted from the sludge. Not fire, but pure, concentrated, holy energy. It washed over them, blinding and searing. It was designed to vaporize vampires. When the light faded, Marielle pushed Ambrose off her. "Ambrose?" He lay on his back, his skin smoking, his eyes closed. He wasn't moving. The blast had hit him full force because he had shielded her. "Ambrose!" She shook him. He didn't breathe. She looked at her wrist. The mark was fading, the light dying out. "No," she whispered. She placed her wrist against his lips. "Take it. Take it all." She focused on the energy, pushing everything she had into him. "Live. Please live." Ambrose gasped, his eyes flying open. But they weren't amethyst anymore. They were bright, piercing gold. He grabbed her wrist, his fangs extending, and for the first time, he looked at her not with love, but with a ravenous, uncontrollable hunger. The world was a kaleidoscope of pain and blinding white light. Ambrose was on top of her, a weight that should have been crushing but felt curiously weightless, like a storm cloud settling on a mountain. His fangs were inches from her pulse. His eyes, usually that cool, intellectual amethyst, were now molten gold, the color of a sun that burned too close to the earth. There was no recognition in them. There was only the ancient, biological imperative of a predator that had been starved for a millennium. "Ambrose?" Marielle whispered. She didn't struggle. Instinct told her that to struggle was to become prey. To run was to trigger the chase. He growled, a sound that vibrated through his chest and into hers. His hand tightened on her wrist, right over the glowing mark of the dragon, and rose. He wasn't hurting her, not yet. But the restraint was fraying. The energy she had poured into him, the pure, raw life force to save him from the blast, had overdosed his system. He wasn't just healed, he was supercharged. "Ambrose, look at me!" she commanded, her voice trembling but firm. She lifted her free hand and placed it on his cheek. His skin was burning hot. He froze. The golden gaze snapped to hers. The pupils were blown wide, black holes in the gold. "You! Run!" he rasped, his voice sounding like it was being dragged over gravel. "Run! From me!" "No," Marielle said. "You came for me in the rain. I'm not leaving you in the fire." She moved her wrist, the one he was gripping, up to his mouth. It was a terrifying gamble. She was offering the vein. "If you need it, take it. But take it as Ambrose, not as a monster." The smell of her blood, pulsing just beneath the thin skin, hit him. He shuddered, his head bowing. He opened his mouth, the sharp points of his fangs grazing her skin. She closed her eyes, waiting for the pierce. It never came. Instead, she felt a tongue, rough and hot, lick the inside of her wrist. He groaned, a sound of agony and reverence, and buried his face in the crook of her neck. He breathed her in, deep, ragged inhales. "I can't," he choked out into her skin. "I can't break you. You are the anchor." Slowly, the golden fire in his eyes began to recede, cooling back into a deep, bruised violet. He rolled off her, collapsing onto the wet grass, staring up at the storm clouds. "What happened?" Marielle asked, sitting up and wiping the mud from her face. "The blast," Ambrose murmured, looking at his hands. They were trembling. "It was concentrated solar energy. It should have incinerated me. But you didn't just heal me. You transmuted the energy. You took the sun and turned it into moonlight." He looked at her, and the fear in his eyes was replaced by awe. "Marielle, do you know what this means? No vampire has survived solar purification in 10,000 years. You have made me something else." Celestia and Tanith emerged from the ruins of the foyer. Tanith's shotgun was bent in half. Celestia looked pale. "The blast radius was contained," Celestia said, eyeing Ambrose warily. "But the wards are down. The explosion shattered the perimeter." "We are exposed," Tanith added, reloading a fresh magazine into a pistol. "No," Ambrose said, standing up. He moved differently now. The fluid grace was gone, replaced by a raw, crackling power. The air around him shimmered. "We aren't exposed. We are being invited." He pointed to the front gates. The massive iron doors were melted slag. Beyond them, standing in the middle of the road, was a legion. Hundreds of figures in white suits, silent and motionless in the rain. And in front of them, sitting on a throne of ice that she had manifested in the middle of the street, was Philomena. Ambrose turned to Marielle. "Stay here." "No," Marielle said, standing up. The house rumbled beneath her feet. The broken gargoyles on the roof began to piece themselves back together with grinding snaps. "You said I was the queen of this castle. The queen doesn't hide in the basement." Ambrose looked at the reforming stone beasts, then at the mark on her wrist, which was now glowing with a steady, golden light that matched his new power. He smiled, a true, feral smile. "Then let us go greet our guests." They walked down the driveway together. Tanith and Celestia flanked them, weapons drawn, but they felt like ornaments compared to the sheer pressure radiating from Ambrose and Marielle. The rain had stopped, replaced by a thick, unnatural fog that swirled around Philomena's ice throne. The matriarch of the White Court looked bored, filing her nails with a diamond file. "You survived," she drawled as they approached. "Disappointing. Vincent was such an expensive toy." "He was a person," Marielle said, her voice cutting through the fog. "You turned him into a bomb." Philomena laughed, a tinkling, soulless sound. "I turned him into what he always was, darling, a vessel for toxic masculinity and insecurity. I just gave it a chemical accelerant. But you—" She stood up, the ice throne shattering behind her into diamond dust. "You are the real prize." She stepped forward, her heels clicking on the wet asphalt. "Do you know why I chose Vincent? Why I targeted a waitress in a diner in District 4? Marielle frowned. "Because you're cruel." "Because of your bloodline, you ignorant child," Philomena hissed. "You are a Thornford. Your grandmother didn't die in a car accident. She was the last weaver, a human line capable of knitting magic back into the dead. Why do you think Ambrose felt full after your sandwich? It wasn't the turkey. It was your proximity." Ambrose stiffened. "You orchestrated this. For 3 years?" "I needed the bond to ripen," Philomena said, circling them. "I needed you to be desperate, Ambrose, and I needed her to be broken. Trauma is the best catalyst for the weaving magic. I broke her arm through Vincent so she would call you. I pushed you to the brink so you would answer. She stopped, raising her hands. The white-suited soldiers raised their weapons, rifles that hummed with the same solar energy that had killed Vincent. And now, Philomena smiled, I will harvest you both, a Daywalker king and a Weaver queen. I will rule Nightcrest for eternity. Fire! Philomena commanded. The air filled with beams of searing white light. Shield! Ambrose roared. He stepped in front of Marielle, raising his hand. A wall of violet shadow erupted, catching the beams. But there were too many. The shadows began to hiss and boil away. I can't hold it! Ambrose gritted out, sweat popping on his forehead. They have too much power! Marielle looked at the beams hitting the shield. She looked at the Greyhaven estate behind them, her home, her sanctuary. Trauma is a catalyst, Philomena had said. No, Marielle thought. Trauma is just the crack where the light gets in. She reached out and grabbed Ambrose's hand, the one holding the shield. Don't hold it, she whispered. Ambrose looked at her. What? Don't block it, she said, her eyes burning. You're a Daywalker now. You don't block the sun, you eat it. Ambrose understood. He dropped the shield. The beams of light hit him. He screamed, his back arching. But instead of burning, his skin began to glow. He became a silhouette of pure gold. He channeled the energy, not into the ground, but through his arm, into Marielle, and into the house. The ground beneath the White Court soldiers began to liquefy. The asphalt turned into black tar, grasping and pulling them down. The gargoyles on the roof launched themselves into the air, not falling, but flying. And from the ocean behind the house, a massive shape rose, a leviathan of water and shadow, summoned by the overflow of magic. The house wasn't just defending them. The entire geography of the estate was waking up. The battle was short, brutal, and chaotic. The gargoyles dove into the ranks of the White Court, immune to the solar rifles. The tar swallowed the soldiers who tried to run. Tanith and Celestia moved through the fog like Valkyries, efficient and deadly. But the center of the storm was the duel between the kings and queens. Philomena shrieked, abandoning her poise. She unleashed a blizzard of razor-sharp ice shards. Ambrose met the ice with fire, golden fire. He moved faster than thought, a streak of light deflecting the shards. But Philomena was ancient. She caught his fist in midair, her skin turning to diamond, and threw him through a brick wall. "You cannot defeat me," she screamed, her eyes bleeding blue light. "I am the winter." She turned to Marielle. "And you are just a waitress." She lunged, an ice dagger forming in her hand. Marielle didn't move. She stood her ground, watching the woman who had manipulated her life, who had turned her pain into a weapon. "I served coffee to demons at 3 a.m., Marielle said quietly. "I survived Vincent. I survived the breaking." As Philomena thrust the dagger, Marielle didn't use magic. She used the environment. She stomped her foot. The pavement, controlled by the estate's roots, buckled upward. A slab of concrete shot up, catching Philomena in the chin, knocking her backward. It was clumsy, it was raw, it was perfect. Ambrose exploded from the rubble. He didn't strike Philomena. He grabbed her. He wrapped his arms around her in a bear hug, pinning her arms to her sides. "Marielle!" Ambrose shouted. "Now, weave it!" "Weave what?" "The curse!" Ambrose yelled. "She wants the Greyhaven power. Give it to her. All of it. The sins of the city. Give her the weight." Marielle understood. The Greyhaven curse. The absorption of Nightcrest's darkness. Ambrose had carried it for centuries. She ran forward and placed her hands on Philomena's forehead. She closed her eyes and pulled. She pulled the darkness out of Ambrose. Every murder he had sensed, every betrayal he had absorbed, the heavy, oily sludge of a city's sin. She pulled it through herself, filtering it, and shoved it into Philomena. Philomena screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain, it was a scream of madness. Her diamond skin cracked, black veins shot through her white perfection. "Too much," Philomena wailed. "It's too loud. The voices. Make them stop." "Enjoy the noise," Ambrose whispered in her ear. He released her. Philomena stumbled back, clutching her head, clawing at her own face. The weight of 1,000,000 sins crashed into a mind that had never known empathy. She fell to her knees, sobbing, broken not by force, but by guilt. The white light in her eyes faded to a dull, lifeless grey. She curled into a ball, catatonic, lost in the nightmare of other people's pain. The fog lifted. The remaining White Court soldiers, seeing their matriarch fallen, dropped their weapons and fled. Ambrose fell to his knees, gasping. He looked lighter. The shadows that had always clung to him were gone. He looked up at Marielle, his eyes a clear, brilliant violet, flecked with gold. "It's gone," he whispered, touching his chest. "The heavy. It's gone." Marielle knelt beside him, taking his hand. "You're free, Ambrose." Ambrose shook his head slowly, interlacing his fingers with hers. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing the mark on her wrist. "No," the king said, smiling, a real boyish smile she had never seen. "I am not free. I am bound, and I have never been happier to be a prisoner. The seasons in Nightcrest changed after that night. The winter was less harsh, the nights less terrified. Whitshaw's diner closed down, replaced by a community centre funded by an anonymous donor. Vincent was gone, a memory washed away by the rain. Philomena was locked in the deepest dungeon of the Greyhaven estate, living in a prison of her own mind, tended to by Celestia. And in the high tower overlooking the sea, the lights no longer flickered. Marielle stood on the balcony, watching the sunrise. She wasn't wearing an apron. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk. Her arm was strong, the scar a silver line of history on her skin. Ambrose stepped up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He didn't burn in the sun anymore. He just felt warm. "The council is asking for a meeting," he murmured into her hair. "They want to know who the new power in Nightcrest is." Marielle leaned back into him, watching the dragon and rose crest on the flag flutter above them. "Let them wait," she said softly. "We have a waltz to finish." She turned in his arms, the music of the ocean playing for them alone. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were the architects of a new dawn. Destiny isn't written in the stars, she realized as he spun her into the light. It's written in the scars we heal, and the hands we hold when the world tries to break us. If you enjoyed this story of healing, magic, and dark romance, please give it a like and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe for more tales from the shadows of Nightcrest. What do you think happened to the rest of the White Court? Let me know in the comments.